Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show. My name is Mark Devlin. I'm the host for what is our weekly hour of politics chat with an anti-nationalist perspective. I'm here tonight with a co-host, Mark Zegfeld and Mary Devlin. How are you tonight, Mary?
I am very well, thank you.
Right, good. And Mark, how have you been? We haven't seen you for a few weeks.
Yeah, I've been great. I've been doing a little bit of research into a couple of topics that I'm going to be covering over the next few weeks.
Okay, great, very good. Well, we're glad to hear more about that as it comes up. Also, of course, we are going to be... Mary, so what are you going to be talking about tonight?
I'm going to be talking about the prisoner early release bill that was passed yesterday.
All right, okay, yes. Let's get all those prisoners, violent prisoners, out in the community. What could go wrong? And indeed, and of course, we'll all be talking about Stephen Flynn and reform. What can be done about them, or what are they doing, I should say, as well. Mary?
Okay, and of course we have Zoomer of the Week.
All right, very good. So we'll be back with all of that and much more in just a few seconds. Find the titles. There we go. Right, welcome back to the Majority Show. Our aim at the Majority is a thriving Scotland without the toxic nationalism that has been strangling Scotland's potential. We are very glad to have Mark Zegfeld here and Mary, and thank you for coming in, Paul, and for everyone else all over the world, including Johnson as well. Okay, I've did that bit. A huge thanks, as always, to our friends at United Against Separation Facebook page, where many of you are watching from tonight.
And remember, sharing is caring. The number one thing you can do is to like this show on YouTube. And even if you don't subscribe, please drop us a like. And if you can subscribe, please do so. Increase our reach at the click of a button. And as usual, I will be managing the relentless flow of comments. So as usual, please keep them short and snappy, and I'll try to put as many on screen as I can.
Right, very good. Right, so I'll just get right into it here. Last Friday, we received the news that Stephen Two Jobs Flynn had given up on his attempt to muscle into the Scottish Parliament via the Aberdeen South and North Kincardine seat of Audrey Nicholl. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What a wee shame that is. But anyway, Flynn said, hands up. I've got this one wrong and I won't be pursuing a dual mandate. My aim to save the public purse from unnecessary strain by potentially overlapping the role of an MP and MSP for a short period until the general election was genuine in its intent, but doing it for the right reasons. At this point, the angel wings came out of his back.
He's all heart, isn't he?
I know, but doing it for the right reasons doesn't change the fact that I got it wrong. My motivation and central belief remains that in Holyrood even, as the heart of the Scottish democracy is the democratic platform that will drive the route to an independent Scotland. All of us in the independence movement must share that common cause and want to be part of that story. Now, as we pointed out as we're going through there, we could almost not even get that out without, as I say, the angel wings sprouting. He just phrases that as though he is somehow the good guy in this, but doesn't actually attempt to address any of the concerns that were brought up over the past few weeks while he was trying to do that. Thank you very much there. The ability, of course, number one, the ability to do two jobs effectively. With even John Swinney saying that it was very, very demanding for a politician to do the two jobs. Well, of course, John Swinney would actually say that, considering he was the one in line to get booted by Stephen Flynn. Anyway, everyone knew this. Another issue that was brought up was misogyny. Bullying out a female MSP when he could pick any number of other seats, a point brought up by David Griffiths last week. So much so that Evelyn Tweet, is that? I don't know if that's the real name of the person.
It's a good name.
Evelyn Tweet. Evelyn, perhaps someone else. Anyway, she's an MSP, never heard of her really anyway, suggested the party put in place protections to stop male candidates from ousting women. And of course, none of nobody complained about him. This ridiculous idea of him saving money. Mark, what do you think of all this? I mean, his withdrawal to begin with.
Yeah, I think I actually don't believe him. I don't
Right.
believe him. I think if he wins a seat in 26, I think he'll turn around and say, "Well, yeah, but I think I can do both until 29. So I'll just carry on till 29 and see how it goes." And I think he'll reverse it. I really do. I don't believe a word that man says. I think he's only doing this and saying this because of a PR. It was pretty awful what happened, and I just think to keep people quiet, I think he's just thought, well, I'll apologise, and because that's suspicious in itself, apologising. Because when was the last SNP politician ever apologised?
Well, that's a very good point. We consider Michael Matheson, Neil Gray, who's on the hook right now for getting chauffeured all around Scotland. To this, apparently, the latest one is to a cinema or a movie.
Well, they only apologise when they think it's really the end of the road. When they're about to get sacked, or they should be getting sacked. Instead, they give an apology.
Well, that's
so it is unusual.
Apologising for getting caught rather than for the act itself. That's what really seems a little bit to me. Now they had this thing. What have they got? Their nonsense about Holyrood as being the heart of Scottish democracy. The democratic platform that will drive the route to an independent Scotland. I mean, I don't really know how that's even possible. It's perhaps you should read the Scotland Act in the same way that Nicola Sturgeon should have read the Scotland Act before she went to the Supreme Court and found out that the judges basically said, read the Scotland Act. So with this as the Constitution is a reserved matter, you cannot have a referendum on it. You cannot use the Scottish Parliament to further further independence. That's not what it's not what it was set up for, and it's not what it is doing, and it's getting more and more restricted that way all the time. We're seeing that soon there won't be the ability to spend any money on any independence related projects. And I mean, I don't really know what he's talking about here as well, because he's basically trying to say is what if they get a majority in the parliament that they'll be able to progress independence? Well, they had a majority.
Yeah, it's the same what they did with the general election, wasn't it? It's the same kind of tactic. It's the same kind of thing. If you vote for us, and he's just trying to. I think they're trying to win back voters that they've lost, and they know they've lost them in the droves. And I think it's a desperate attempt of look. Give us one final chance in 26. Give us give us your vote again, and I'm telling you, we will.
Yeah, I get it. So you think that basically he's like the white savior, coming in and save the natives.
I'll get you independence. I'll get you independence. Don't worry about Sweeney and Sturgeon and that. I'll be able to do it.
Yes, that's a hero complex. There, like you see, maybe perhaps he sees himself a bit like a kind of independence Bruce Willis. Who's going to come in and save the day. It's that type of thing. But ultimately, it is, though, gaslighting, my favourite word of these past few months. They have been gaslighting as an industrial scale. There's no way to use the Scottish Parliament as a springboard for independence. They did that. They tried that for how many years? And they didn't get anywhere. So why is he going to make the difference? Does he somehow uniquely think that he's going to be able to do that? But I mean, do you think that, Mark? Do you think that this will draw? You said he wasn't going to. He would try again.
I think he'll change his mind. If he gets elected at Holyrood, I think he'll turn around. And he'll change his mind and say, well, it's only till 2029. I'll just do 2 jobs because they need me in Westminster because we've only got 9 MPs. I think it'll be,
So you think he'll give up? He would give up the Westminster seat anyway to do that?
Yeah, I think what he'll do is he'll say, look, I'll stay as an MP while I'm an MSP till 2029 and then I'll give it up.
Right.
That's
But
what
he can't.
and
He's not
think
able.
he'll
I don't
try-
think he's able to do that because of the. They're going to. They have to have an NEC meeting, and it seems like they're not going to be able to. They're not going to allow any that him to have that ability to
I
do
think,
it. Right?
yeah, but I just don't trust the SNP. I think they'll change. I think they'll manipulate
change the
the
rules.
rules. Yeah, again.
I don't know. I don't know if Swinney would really want him back. Anyway,
I think his biggest ambition is to become the first minister of Scotland.
yes. Well, that is bigger than being one of a band of 9 MPs in Westminster, certainly. And there's nothing, obviously, doing nothing there now. Not to say he was doing nothing, because he was on. He did actually manage to get a question in at Prime Minister's questions today. Now, there he was talking to the head of the country. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As everyone in the House will be aware, we're currently in the middle of BBC Anti-Scam Awareness Week. And of course, the advice in that context is always simple. If you see a scam, you should report it. So with that in mind, can the Prime Minister advise the House? Is he aware of anyone who's promised to reduce energy bills only for them to increase? Is he aware of anyone who promised to back business only to tax business? And is he aware of anyone who promised to protect pensioners only to pick their pockets for their winter fuel allowance?
Well, it's very good to see.
Sorry. The gallery will not clap and not interrupt the proceedings. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to see him in his seat in this House, as I'm sure many of his colleagues in Scotland share that sentiment. What I can point to is a government in Scotland that promised to take Scotland forward and took them backwards. So I can identify the first one. It's right there.
So I have to say, being burned by Keir Starmer is, maybe not high on his list of priorities. Anyway, I will say it was quite an interesting line. It was quite humorous to some extent, if only it was that the irony, of course, being that in Scotland, it's the SNP that have destroyed business and have raised taxes, and who are holding back the winter fuel allowance. So I suppose that's accuse the other side of what you are guilty of. But what we've argued here, if a senior SNP politician thinks he can do 2 jobs, then there is not enough work in either Holyrood or Westminster. And if there's not enough work at Holyrood, why are we paying people to work there? Grifters like Flynn, it says here. At the time of the establishment of the Scottish Parliament, many people, including myself, wondered why it was necessary at all, considering there were already 50 MPs represented, directly elected, in fact, and who were supposed to represent the people, not necessarily the people of Scotland, but their constituents in Scotland, and they could have had some pan-Scottish agendas there. But so why was it really necessary to add another 100 representatives, which are now going to cost us, running the Parliament itself, 100 million a year, running the government, 720 or 30 million a year, almost £1 billion a year it's going to be coming up in these next decade. And £10 billion in a decade wasted on people unnecessary people just wasted talking when they could have had the MPs doing it.
And the councils are complaining. I mean, they're complaining today that they're just not going to be able to balance the books right, ahead of the budget, which is next Thursday.
Well, especially while they siphon off the money for their pet projects, as we've talked many times, of course, on this show. Bike lanes everywhere while schools are closing and so on. 25 years failure later, Stephen Flynn has done us all a favour in some way by confirming that Holyrood is a failure that attacks do nothing failures as well. Mark, final words on Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, he's just that little question there was just a hypocrisy off this scale. Absolutely, completely. What a hypocrite. After all the scams we've seen from the Scottish government.
Yes.
Dare I even mention Branchford, the biggest scam of all. So, the man is just, it's just unbelievable the hypocrisy that we've seen from this government and from these these actors that we see now. It's just, you know, they live in a bubble if they don't understand what we think. They're just living in a bubble, and they've got no idea whatsoever, Mark. Absolutely no
Yeah,
idea.
so our job, I hope, is, and some other people's jobs, to burst that bubble and to say this is just not good, not really not good for
Not acceptable.
Scotland. Have we had any? I mean, you're going to talk a little bit about this later, Mark, with the NHS results, some reports on what a disaster the SNP stewardship of that has been. Right, so we will take a short break, and we will be back in a few seconds with an amazing donation message. But not only that, we'll be back to talk about Nigel Farage and reform. So we'll see you in just a second. Thanks to all of you coming in to watch tonight. The weather's getting colder. What better thing can you do as sit in front of this warm conversation that we're having here? That's warm,
Heated.
yes, warm the heart of anyone who looks at the SNP and Nationalists with disdain. Anyway, but
we'll cheer you up.
We will indeed. The majority survives entirely in donations from great people just like yourself. This is the flattery approach. You're so wonderful, everyone out there. So it would be great for you to help us and support us by donating to the show. Many of you do already, and we are incredibly grateful.
Thank you.
And thankful for that. We have all kinds of costs doing this thing. You would surprise some of them. But every donation, big or small, helps us power our fight against toxic nationalism and gets us ready to fight against it in 2023 as well. So if you would like to donate, there are many ways to do that. You can go to our website, and there's a donate button on the right-hand side of every page, and we do monthly or one-time donations. Or if you're watching the show right now on YouTube, you can put a super thanks, super sticker, and if we see that going past in the chats, we will try and give you a shout out. I think it was a few weeks ago we had some people, and maybe in last week as well. That was great. So thank you very much. Now, this week we've seen a slew of articles about Nigel Farage's Reform Party and its prospects in Scotland. We're only making plans for Nigel as the song goes. Maybe it's going to work in the British Steel Senate, whatever. Anyway, Reform won, as we all know, 7% of the vote in Scotland in July's general election. And that came now in the 3 council by-elections that were held in Glasgow last Thursday. The party won the backing of 18% of voters in the northeast of the city and almost 13% in both Maryhill and Drumchapel and Anniesland, although the turnouts were low. This is the article here. He was in the Sunday Times there. What is that actually? I don't know. It's quite a menacing image anyway.
I think it's Nigel with wings. No,
Nigel with wings. It's like something out of the wall or something like that.
Maybe he's been eating a lot of drinking a lot of Red Bull.
Anyway, he told the Sunday Times, yeah, I mean, I couldn't even tell you what the Scottish Conservatives stand for. I haven't got an effing clue what they stand for. I mean, I just don't know who they are or what they are. It's almost as if they sort of deserted the pitch. Now, we might ask what Reform stands for, but we'll get to that in a minute. The interesting thing about this article was that he said he could appeal to Labour voters and SNP voters. As for Labour voters, he said all those seats that Labour won in Scotland, they were what I would call loveless victories. There wasn't any great, whoa, this is a Labour Party, this isn't this exciting. There was none of that, which I think misjudges to some extent why people voted Labour in Scotland. I think many people were actually excited to vote Labour, especially Labour supporters. So,
of which there are a few.
Yes, of which there are a few, and they were looking for a good chance to do that. Of course, SNP disaffected SNP, also willing to vote Labour and give them a chance, and many people did for tactical voting as well. So, people were, I mean, maybe as we're in these early stages of Labour government, people are a bit like, okay, it's not going that well, perhaps, but People were excited to do so. But this is the bizarre bit, though, I think. He says he can appeal to SNP voters. Well, there are various reasons, obviously, but a lot of people were voting SNP. It was almost the anti-establishment vote. And we are a kind of anti-establishment party, but I hope respectable. Mark, do you really think people will go from Labour or even the SNP to Reform? Let's take one at a time. Labour.
I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure. So actually, I think they may do because of, and that's quite interesting what you said there, because it ties in with what they were doing during the general election, where they've got people within the party that are saying that they would be quite happy with an independence vote, and that they would like to if the people wanted it, they would accept that and give them that, or give them a chance of that. So that kind of ties in. Are they saying that? Is Nigel saying that just to try and entice SNP voters to vote for reform? I don't know. He seems to be all over the place at the moment with his comments on such things like immigration. At Westminster, he said one thing and now he's saying another, completely the opposite of what he said about immigration. So he's all over the place at the moment. So I don't really know what Reform stand for. I've spoke to somebody in Reform in Scotland about Scotland, and apparently this is going to be all sorted out within 3 months. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced with Reform whatsoever. And until they do get rid of all these independence candidates that they've seemed to have propped up, they certainly won't get my kind of support anyway.
I think it seems to me a little bit like this talk about I think there's a possibility to get some Labour people back. There's possible the Red Wall, we support Brexit, Labour people like that. So perhaps that time has passed. I don't know. There's an idea that maybe Labour doesn't support the working class person, and that they could go to Reform, and Reform would, understand them a bit more. I mean, those people are the people who Labour working people who would lose their jobs because there's too much immigration. Now, that's fair enough. But I don't see anyone in the SNP going back to going to Reform. I don't get this. And so I think to a lot of extent, this is it's a mask. It feels like to me. It's like he's saying, yeah, we're attracting people from Labour and we're attracting people from the SNP, and of course not mentioning that what they're really trying to do is take all the people away from the Tories, right? And so it's a kind of mask. It's not honest actually in some way. It's like he's not saying we want to just take all the Tory people away, and we don't actually care about
maybe
the
there's
SNP.
not enough of them though.
If
you took all the Tory people, they wouldn't win, would they? Because they need the SNP, and maybe he thinks
but they can't
the Tory ones are the easy target.
But if he keeps saying or the mentioning, and the vice chairman that says that they want to, he'll give them an independence. Maybe he's trying to say to the SNP supporters, you're not getting an independence vote involved with the SNP. That's gone. You know that that's not going to happen. But if you come to us, maybe we might just be able to do it for you.
No,
I don't trust him.
Yeah, no. I don't know. Now,
not at this point.
Yes, well, as many of you know, while I have respect for Farage's influence and achievements, I'm not a fan of Reform for multiple reasons, maybe some of them which Mark has already mentioned. The first one being that due to them not standing down candidates in the general election, they gifted the SNP as many as 6 seats. Now, I'd like to just think about that for a second, right? Reform had no hope of winning those seats, and it would have been no loss to stand down there if they had, because in the other seats they could still say, well, we got 7%, or we got whatever percentage it was in any case. And they wouldn't have suffered any reputational damage like people like Mark just said off the cuff, right, not going to support them because of their candidates and so on. But as many of you know, I wrote an open letter to Mr Farage and to the party, and it was co-signed by almost every major social media account in Scotland, representing literally hundreds of thousands of followers. The party completely ignored it, didn't do anything at all. And And it came election night. We were all happy, of course, that in the end the SNP only won 9 seats. But Farage's crew meant that the SNP would actually only have won 3 seats. Think how devastating that would have been. 9 seats was bad enough. But if they'd come out with only 3 seats, then it would have been quite a different matter altogether. So this, I think, I said at the time that that's going to would cause them reputational damage, and that was the main reason for them to do that. Because now, every time the discussion of reform comes up, people like me and Mark will say, "But you gave seats to the SNP." And in fact, today on Twitter, David Griffiths, who's not here with us tonight, but he basically said that, where is it? He was discussing with his woman. Let me see if I can find this very quickly. I think it's up the back here. Oh no, that's not it. That's not a reform. No, he was discussing anyway with a woman on Twitter, and the lady said basically that she would be quite happy that she'd rather have SNP MPs or MSPs than Labour MSPs. And here it is. Here she said, "Give me 38 incompetent and impotent SNPs any time over this vile, vindictive, tyrannical Labour government." David was quite unhappy about that, of course, and he made a few more comments about it. And then he got a call actually from the head of the party in Scotland. And he said that this person, I can't remember his name right now, confirmed that the party is pro-UK and anti-SNP. What does that mean, though? It's just like a talk. It's just talk. Oh, yeah, we're anti-SNP, but we want a referendum in 2039, which is another one of their crazy policies that they came out with. Mark, you kind of mentioned that as well. So we've got these candidates who are sitting there just spouting off whatever they like. And then they've got the people, the leadership are saying stuff like, well, as I said, we'll have a referendum in 2039 when the threat's passed. Well, if the threat's passed, why would you have a referendum? It's like, and why are people voting for reform? Okay, you're disaffected by what the Tories were, okay, and what Labour are, but what's it going to get you, Mark? What do you think?
Yeah, it just seems... I've been following reform for a little while because they have popped up out of nowhere and they are growing and growing. And I've noticed in Wales the leading Labour in Wales in the polls for to take and Wales has always been Labour. Going far back, they've always been supported Labour, and now it seems that Reform are ahead of Labour in the for their elections. So I don't really know. I think personally that people are so fed up of the main parties. They're now just saying, well, they can't do any worse, let's just vote for them. I think that's kind of dangerous. I think that's dangerous talk, in my view. I think you've got to know what that party's about to vote for them, because you may get something worse.
Oh yes, of course. That's the point.
Well, people are taking that chance now, though, aren't they?
Well,
as you say, they thought the Conservatives were terrible. Labour have come in and they're even worse. So people are now willing to take a risk.
Consider that most Labour voters will defend their own party as well. But I mean,
they are doing a lot of defending. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They are doing a lot of defending. So perhaps unnecessarily so. But then people would say, well, if the other, I guess, playing devil's advocate, which I don't like to do very much, but the Reform people would say, well, it's not our fault that the parties are so bad. Right, we're here to put pressure on them at the very minimum. Right, that's what you would say. They would say. So it's up to the parties to react. Now, talking about them reacting, we have, can the Tories fight back? For example, the Tories got most to lose in this, or perhaps most to gain by joining with them. Perhaps, who knows? Russell Finlay, leader of Scottish Conservatives, said of Reform, "The number of votes they get is too high for my liking. And it's my job to persuade people that we are on their side and we understand the problems. And frankly, Nigel Farage is not the answer." Nice personal dig there. So can they fight back, Mark?
The Conservatives, I quite like the look of what Conservatives have been done in Scotland since Russell's took over. I think he's done an excellent job in getting his message out there, and I think I actually think the Conservatives will do well in the next election in 2026. I really do. I think they're the only party that's held the SNP accountable over the last 3 or 4 years about all these bad laws that they've been coming out with, the GRR and the bottle scheme. They're the ones that have voted against them, while Labour have voted with the SNP on a lot of those laws and that. So it's just the reputational name of a Conservative, isn't it, that I think's holding them back.
Yeah,
because as a party, I think they've done really well.
Well, I think to some extent they have to reinvent themselves and say what they actually stand for. I did notice Kemi Badenoch the other day saying capitalism isn't a bad thing, isn't a bad word. Now, okay, you can say that, but can you make the policies and put that in place so that people can feel that there's actually going to be growth? I don't know about you, but I feel lately this, especially when you compare what's going on here with what's going on in the States, where you have basically it seems like a clean sweep against climate nonsense, woke nonsense, trans ideology, and just a focus on let's build, but focus on the people like Elon Musk, for example, who are making stuff and doing things and providing jobs and growth for the country. And you feel that's actually going on over there, while we're stuck in this, let's tax everyone to death and put all these different restrictions on them. And it's doubly worse in Scotland, where they're doing it, with a plus sign added on to everything. And it's like that time. It seems you look at America and you're thinking, well, this time maybe that's this time of nonsense is over, but we're stuck in even more of it. Mark, do you have any feelings?
Yeah, I think the issue with the Scottish Conservatives is they get lumped in with the Conservatives at Westminster, and it's completely unfair because they are a different party with different policies, with a different fight, in a different parliament. So I think that's the issue. I think Russell's got is that he's got to somehow separate himself with his message from Westminster, even if no matter what they do, he's got to keep banging on that we are a different party with different policies, a different leader, and a different fight. And they seem to have struggled with that over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think that's
I'm not entirely in agreement with that. I think there's a way to square the circle, which is basically we say, and I've said this before, it says we are part of the UK organisation for conservatism or Labour. You can apply this to Labour as well, because there's so much discussion about the winter fuel payment, and I mean that's a better example actually, where Labour can just say, look, our Scottish we're in the Scottish Parliament to deal with this issue at the local level, and the Scottish Parliament, SNP, have blocked the winter fuel allowance. This is what devolution is for us to do this. Now, we discussed this, they might say, we discussed this with the UK Parliament, but, it wasn't the UK Parliament, as is a right. We're just a part of it along with everyone else. That's their right to say, no, that the other considerations. But I think this idea to try and say that they're separate, I think we have to say that, I think it needs to, not so much to be said that they're separate, but they're interlinked and they work in different ways. And I think that's part of what you're saying, Mark. So if I be so bold to clarify that.
I think the other thing is we have to remember that Russell Findlay's only been in the job for a few weeks.
Yes.
And so far, it's been going extremely well for him. But he is very new, so it's going to take a while for people to get to know him and to get to know the policies and how he's actually going to act in the Scottish Parliament as the leader.
He started well. He has started well because the main thing for me was when he come out and said independence talk is off the table. If it gets discussed in Parliament, we'll walk out.
Yes,
because we want to concentrate on devolved matters. That to me is what I wanted to hear from Ross, and I didn't hear that. He fell into that trap. So I think he started really well.
Right, I'm going to leave with this section on about Farage with this quote, which is at the end of the article, which was a bit weird. about UKIP and Scotland. He says, I realised 25 years ago that UKIP was never going to work in Scotland because the word independence meant something different north of the border. South of the border, independence, yes. Or the EU, we want to be independent. But also in Scotland, there has never been a debate about the EU of any kind at all. The constitutional debate was all about whether Scotland separates from the UK. It wasn't about the European Union. So just the name of the party doomed it from the start. And this strikes me as being very weird, because he appears to be saying that Scots can't understand the difference between independence from the EU and independence from the UK, and that Scots don't really care about the EU. But 30% SNP voters, for a start, voted for Brexit. And it just seems, I just don't understand this, because it's just a very weak analysis. It's not like, what I think he should be saying is, 30% of Scots, 30% or more, however many percentage it was, 40% of Scots voted for to leave the EU, and that's the people we need to be focused on. And even the SNP people who voted for Brexit. But it's this kind of weird reversal of like saying he doesn't understand why. And I noticed that, actually, if you're thinking about it just right now off the top of my head, that article is just about it's his analysis, but it doesn't ring, none of it rings very true to me. So I'm not sure that voting for a protest party really works. We've seen the effect of voting for a protest party in Scotland for the past 17 years, and what a disaster it has made, especially if they've just got one single thing. Okay, so you want to stop immigration, right? What have they got beyond that? What is it? We just don't really know. So I'd be very
They're
wary
anti-woke.
of dealing that. Well, anti-woke, but what are they actually going to do about it?
Yeah.
That's the question. Who are they going to put in place? Who are they going to talk? Have they got, this is all these type of things as well. I know exactly, independence from UK and then join EU. Absolute madness. Anyway, so.
I think that's what Farage couldn't understand.
What?
That in Scotland people want independence from the UK, but they didn't want independence from the EU. It doesn't make sense.
Well, the thing is that it's not so important to think about the people who voted against you, right? It's like to say, you've got these people here. He's kind of saying that, he's actually kind of saying that Scots don't care, Scots don't care about the EU, and two, that somehow they don't understand the difference. Even it's a little bit condescending, really, and it just kind of it's a bit weird. Especially at this late stage to talk about it, when he should actually be saying, I'm going here to get all the people who are who saw what we did in the EU and how we were able to do stuff. I don't know. I should give him some free consulting, but I'll make a pint of beer out of it as well. Anyway. Right, whatever. Okay. Any final words on Farage, Mark?
Maybe we should get him on the show to explain himself.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea, I think. Anyway, but have a pint with Mark. That's what we will do. We'll start having but we'll have cocktails instead. Strong martinis is what you need to be watching the show. We'll be back in a few seconds. Mark Zegfeld will be talking about Scottish hospitals and how poorly they're performing. If I can find the button. Okay, there we go. Right, Mark, you're up to tell us what's the disaster.
Right.
This week's disaster.
We've got the recovery plan, the NHS recovery plan of 2021 from Humza. So we know it's going to be a disaster from just saying that. So
right,
anyway,
okay.
the IFS have come out and said that Scotland is doing far worse recovering from the pandemic after the pandemic to the pre-pandemic levels than England.
Okay.
England have started recovering, and Scotland is actually getting worse.
Oh, really?
I think you've got a graph.
I do have this graphic. Actually, I haven't actually looked in any detail here.
Well,
okay.
It's very small on my screen. What's it saying,
right,
Mark?
Okay, I'll read it out. Okay, yeah. Elective care, size of waiting list is the first row, and then the next row is up here, Scotland versus England, and each two columns is relative to pre-pandemic and relative to last year. And in Scotland, everything is worse. So whether it's effective care, number of people treated within 18 weeks of referral, a number of people waiting for a year. Emergency care, more people waiting for more than 4 hours. Cancer care, percentage waiting less than 62 days. and diagnostic tests, and only of waiting 6 weeks, actually, relative to last year, Scotland is the only thing that is better in there. Of course, in the other two columns, you can see here, column 3 and 4, we can see that in column 4 particularly, that England, its results are better pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
Except for elective care, yeah.
Yes. Good.
What we've seen since between April and June, hospitals in Scotland treated 6% fewer inpatients and daycare patients than before the pre-pandemic. I think you've just read some of them things.
Oh, so I didn't realise that.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I should have got those. I should have read the script this time.
The SNP.
Just go ahead with
it. Just go ahead, Mark.
They pledged 300 million towards this plan. It was a Humza plan, and they pledged 300 million to drive down the waiting lists. And only 30 million of that funding, as of today, has gone to the health boards. Only 30 million.
Do you have any idea why, Mark?
I think it's just another. I think personally, it was another one of those pledges that they make in Parliament, and then we find out later when you look at the small print or you look at the statistics that you find that money's not being sent, or it's been siphoned off to other causes or whatever, and they just it's a pattern, because we've seen it with quite a few things, haven't we? Housing. How much did they say they were going to put into housing? And when you find out, it was a small fraction that actually went into housing. So they're actually.
It was all the money they got for cladding, for example. Well, all the COVID money itself.
Yeah,
all the money that was given for COVID.
Yeah, I think it goes. A lot of it, I think, goes towards these little pet projects to keep coming up with these freebies that they want to give to buy votes, and I think they stash it away. And then they use it on a rainy day when they're in trouble, and they say, right, then let's we're going to give free, and it's just for a headline. It's all just for a headline. We'll give this free, we'll give that free, and I think this is why our major services are struggling like they are, because the money's just being siphoned off.
I think it's a little bit different from that. Actually, I think it's easy for them to make headlines. That's true. And the amount of money we're talking about, well, 300 million is a decent chunk of change, I suppose. But I think the real problem we have is that the big things can't get cut. And basically, I think when any person comes in to the Scottish budget, and if they're from the SNP, they're like, no, we can't cut disability. We can't cut the social care, and we can't. They treat those as sacred cows. Now that may be good. They think, of course, the good reason for that, because they don't want to get the criticism that they're causing any type of austerity or anything like that. But there's a lot of inefficiency in these things, certainly, and even to the point now where Labour is actually saying that they're going after false disability claims as well, which is basically something the Tories were, because they know that these are the big ticket items. They can save billions of pounds on these things, but in Scotland they won't touch them. So what we've got is that the budget is always just being taken up by these huge big spends that aren't touched.
Well, welfare's always going up.
Yes, and they're adding stuff, and then they add other stuff on top, and then they go, "Oh, we don't have any money." Oh, well, of course you don't have any money, because you don't cut anything. Of course, the other thing is the civil service budget. We saw it was there, 4,000 people employed in the Scottish Welfare Department or something like that. Right? You're like 4,000 people. I mean, be serious. The extra child payments for another one. They won't cut it, because then it's one thing to give something away for free, but then it's another to take it back. So this is the real problem is that they've got these huge spending things that they just. I don't even think they're competent enough to cut them. But I think more than that is that they just can't, because they've been ideologically they can't cut them. And that's the problem we have here. So,
but then we'll get all we're going to get we'll get Neil Gray standing up in Parliament saying, well, we've got the best performing health service in the whole of the UK. We'll have Sweeney standing up saying, well, we've got the best health service and we're doing better than England, when the facts do not bear that out. But do they get pulled up for it? Does the presiding officer step in and say, well, hold on a minute, that's not actually true. Can you tell the truth for once? We don't get any, we just hear the lies and lies and lies of how well they're actually doing. And the problem actually is getting worse and it's not getting fixed. We've got the Humza plan. What's going to be next? The Sweeney plan. And then it'll be the Skulls plan. We'll get all these different first ministers standing up saying, we're going to fix it, and I've got a plan, but this plan's been in operation since 2021, and things have actually got worse. Not better. Mm-hmm. So when are things going to actually start? When are they going to actually start standing up and saying, well, this is too important. The health service is far too important because people are dying waiting on these waiting lists.
Of course.
People are suffering. Why? When will they stand up and say, this is too important for politics? Let's work together as a parliament and get this fixed for the Scottish people.
Yeah.
No. Well, the health minister should be fighting for that 300 million. If I was running a department and I was promised 300 million pounds and only received 30 million pounds, I would be on the phone every day saying, "Where's my money?"
It's ideologically driven. Here's the. I looked this up. The cladding. Right. Here's the cladding thing. Flammable cladding. Flammable cladding replaced in one of 5,000 Scottish housing blocks.
5,500.
5,500, right? And it says they got 97.1 million. Okay, and they've spent. It's something like it says here they spent 16 million or something. Yeah, they spent 16 million on it.
It was the same with all the EU money.
They've only done one building.
I reported on the EU money that they had hundreds of millions to spend on that, and they couldn't spend it.
But it's not as if these.
So I had to go back.
But it's not as if these things aren't serious things. The cladding, it's highly important that gets changed. We've seen one fire in London. Are we waiting for another one in Scotland before they do something? These dangerous things. It's neglecting their duties by neglecting the cladding, the hospitals, the health. The health service. It's absolutely. And what is Neil Gray doing? He's going to football matches in limousines and going to
the movies. In his limousine, and then claiming it's for cultural reasons. It's a cultural trip. Yeah, I'm going to go and see.
He's not the culture minister.
No, absolute nonsense. Anyway, I mean, it's just. I mean, we have to get rid of these shysters. Really, that's what it comes down to. People, if you're given, you just can't. What's the point? What's the point of having a Scottish Parliament if it makes Scots worse?
Yeah.
What's the point of having imbeciles in charge if it makes Scots worse? The results worse. There's no point in that. I'd rather have someone who's a civil service in the UK that's actually dealing with all the UK issues and putting the best people into it than some kind of subset of it.
The Scottish office would have been dealing with all this much better.
Yeah, of course.
Well, you said yourself, Mark, that building's costing us $1 billion a year. Give me $1 billion a year, and I'll sort that. I'll make sure the health service is a lot better. It's doing a lot better.
Well mentioned, Alan. 200 million for the
recycling.
Recycling nonsense.
And by the way, that 200 million for the recycling. If they lose that case, will end up being $1 billion. Plus, because you have all these other companies piling in as well. So that 200 million is going to be a fraction.
But they're a bit daft, really, because you think about it. If you do make some, politics is about choices, right? So you want to make some choices. You say we need to cut something big. So you brass it out in the big thing, like the winter fuel allowance. That's what it's not even that big.
That's not big.
But brass it out, and then you say, then we give you all this other stuff because we've saved so much money. Then you get all the, that's the theory of what they're doing in Labour anyway. Whether that actually pans out or not, it's nobody said politics was particularly easy. All right, moving on. Back in a second, Mary's going to talk about prisoners roaming around the streets unnecessarily, or is it necessary? We'll back with that in a second. But first of all, Did you know that Santa's elves have been very busy in the workshop making a range of amazing majority T-shirts, mugs, and mouse pads that you can give as presents this Christmas? Look at this. Abolish Holyrood. I mean, imagine you wake up on Christmas Day and you get an Abolish Holyrood T-shirt from Santa, made by his own elves. What about that? You'll be walking around. This is great. This is me. I'm so great. Abolish Holyrood. And
I think it's on the Christmas list number. It's number one on the Christmas
it's
list.
definitely a dear Santa.
Top presents this
Please
year.
bring me a hashtag Abolish Holyrood T-shirt. So please, now if you can't get them directly from Santa, you can get them from the majority shop, which is on our website
With a 10% discount.
Yes, we can get that, and fantastic mugs, mouse mats, and some nice designs of T-shirts there as
But
well.
everything's not Abolish Holyrood, is it?
No, not just Abolish
have other
Holyrood. We have
items.
majority ones. We have some nice ones. We have a nice one for the ladies, which is I'm too. What's it? I love Scotland too much to be a nationalist, for example. That's a nice one. Gets a conversation going in the back. That does. Right. Mary, you are up with talking about wild roaming prisoners in the streets. And I'm
Exactly.
going to do the captions and the things.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mark.
like this.
Yesterday, the Scottish Parliament passed a new law to lower the minimum term served by prisoners who have been given short sentences. This is all supposed to relieve the overcrowding in Scottish prisons. The current prison population in Scotland, it was 8,253 at the beginning of November, but ministers have warned it significantly exceeds the target operating capacity of 8,007. So I think we're about 240 odds over the maximum number. So most prisoners serving less than 4 years will now be released after serving 40% of their sentence. Yes, 40%.
40%.
Rather than the previous 50%.
Okay.
I always thought that they get like 1/3 off for good behavior or something. But it seems
Yes.
now that, so if you get like a 1-year sentence, it would have been cut to 6 months, but now it's probably cut to less than 5 months. So this is going to mean that between 260 and 390 inmates will be eligible for immediate release in February 2025, so just a couple of months away. The new rules don't apply to those sentenced for domestic abuse or sexual offences, but it
Well, I
does
hope so.
but it does include violent
No.
offenders.
Oh, for God's sake.
Now, the SNP government managed to get the bill passed yesterday with the support of the Greens by 67 votes to 54. Labour, the Tories and the Lib Dems voted against it. But the Association of Scottish Police Superintendents said the new legislation would see the public being put at risk. Now, they did have, do you remember I reported before, they had a previous early release scheme last
Yes.
June and July, which I reported on, which saw 477 inmates released in 4 tranches.
Yes.
And it was later revealed that 188 of those released in the summer were convicted of non-sexual crimes of violence, which is nearly 40% of all those released early. So
Crazy.
those were violent offenders. And more than 50 people, which is nearly 10%, released as part of the emergency scheme, returned to prison within weeks of their release, it was revealed. So basically they're putting people out in the street and then they re-offend. The police have to do all their work again, and then they're back in the prison system anyway. So this is not helping with any overcrowding. The Scottish Tory Justice spokesman, who is Liam Kerr, he said this is the SNP's reckless plan to release hundreds more prisoners in a weak surrender to criminals. So this is more of the soft touch justice that we have in Scotland. They've basically railroaded this through Parliament without a moment's thought for the victims or public safety.
They don't care.
And they're turning a blind eye to concerns raised by police officers over how many prisoners released previously went on to quickly re-offend. And the bill sums up how disconnected the SNP are from the public. Public are looking for some common sense, and we want, violent people off the streets, not put back on the streets. So Liam Kerr said this is a crisis of the SNP's own making. Rather than regularly carrying out prisoner release schemes, they must look at alternatives to tackle overcrowding, including the deportation of foreign criminals taking up places in Scotland's jail. So I think it would be interesting to actually know how many foreign criminals there are in Scotland's jails. And I'd read last week that in Scotland, they don't keep any information on the nationality of prisoners.
Right.
And I think that's a bit weird, isn't it?
That is
Why wouldn't you be
strange.
keeping a record of what their nationality is? But anyway, guys, what do you think?
Well, personally, I'm quite confused about this because Andrew Constance said that crime is at its lowest since 1974. But how can it be if our prisons are overcrowded?
Right.
Unless they demolish some
It
prisons.
doesn't make sense, does it? If our prisons are at maximum, in fact, over maximum, then it can't be the lowest since 1974. I would, because
Yeah.
Prisons weren't releasing prisoners early in 1974. I know that because I went and checked. So it doesn't make sense, does it?
And you think there must have been new prisons built since 1974,
Well,
and
yeah.
they're completely full to the brim as well.
Yeah. So this idea, but it's the way the SNP want to look at things. They don't. They look at it different to other like England do. They look at how many people report crime. Now we know that them figures have been manipulated because that came out a few months ago that they were manipulating figures for years about call centres and that. So I think it's just another cover up of look, we're doing better than England, but we're actually not.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just pretty weird that in all of this discussion, there's very little discussion about just build more jails. I mean, it's not that complicated to
There's
build
no
a
money.
jail, is it? Really? Oh,
Been asking for that.
There's no money. Oh, really? That's it. There is money. It's just a choice that they don't do it.
They don't
That's
choose
the
to
thing,
make.
right? Probably because building a jail takes so many years, and they don't want to be, on the hook for it, whatever.
And where are they going to put all those people who are committing all the hate crimes? All the people who are like tweeting stuff.
I really put myself. I'm not a hate crime person, but those who commit hate crimes are just in a big database that's ready to pounce on you at any point when you've got a social
but
score.
they've got nowhere to put you at the moment. So.
Yes.
Well, my dad was a prison governor back in the 80s, and he did an interview. He contacted the Home Office, and he was part of an investigation, and he came up with that we need prison reform and we need new prisons built, and that was back in the late 80s, early 90s, and they never built any. So they were struck, this has been an issue for a long time, all over the UK, but especially in Scotland, because we've seen no new prisons or anything spent on the prison service or
not this century.
No.
So yes, Mary, if you can finish up your section.
No, I think it's ridiculous, even the idea that, if a judge gives a sentence, for example, of a year, and now that they're only going to serve about 5 months.
Well, this is a good
it's
time
only going to be at 40%.
The message is, of course, this is a good time to be a criminal. I think this is we should all just go out and commit whatever crimes we like, and we can get a few years.
Yeah, we probably get life.
You steal a few million and get a few years off.
Well, if you burgle someone's house, you won't. That's not a crime anymore.
You
apparently,
won't even investigate you half the time. Yeah. Anyway, right, Mary. Fascinating section. I think it's terrible. Really, good people. I mean, Anne-Marie Ward there asked, "Is it evil?" I think there's a kind of banality of evil, kind of fuel to it a little bit. That is administrative evil, in a sense, where that these decisions are made, and they are not. They're done for the consideration of the public is like last thing in people's mind. It's like financial stuff, unless there doesn't seem to be any duty of care to keeping the public safe, and people, they'd rather shave a few pence off a budget and let someone get murdered or raped.
Yeah.
That's really what it feels like a lot. Right.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, for the fact check.
Very good. Okay. Yes. So it's obviously gone up quite a bit. Right. Great. We've all the best people watching the show. So you can see here. Everyone tunes in. Of course, things you can do right now to support the show. You can buy a t-shirt muggle. We did that a minute ago. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube, or if you can't really subscribe, I know it's so hard to press that button, but you could press the one next to it that says like. It doesn't require quite so much commitment, but every like helps us go up the algorithm. And as you know, we're all slaves to the algorithm these days, and anything can help us get out of our slavery is good. You can also tell your friends about us. You can do all of the above, which makes us extremely it makes us extremely happy and fulfilled. Underlined exclamation mark. Right, let me just get back to this bit here. Coming up, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It's the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay.
Right, we'll press the thing. Right, my Zoomer of the Week is Peter Mullan. Now, some of you may not know who Mr. Mullan is, but he's a man known for pretending to be other men, or in some cases, imaginary beings. Last time I saw him, he was pretending to be King of the Dwarfs in Amazon's The Rings of Power, which is an offshoot of Lord of the Rings. In that, he played a dwarven king as a grumpy Scotsman, which was not much of a stretch, to be honest. Anyway, Peter was in the news this week, grumbling about the 2014 referendum. Perhaps he'd been down a mine and had forgotten that it was 10 years ago. But off he went anyway, blaming the loss. Let me find the thing here. Mark. Okay, here we go. Right, blaming the loss and saying it was a kind of blackmail. Sorry, that's a little bit small, but anyway, that's what you're getting anyway there. He said, and I quote, "It was a particular form of blackmail. If you leave us, we will bankrupt you. There will be a hard border. And most insultingly, if you leave us, you'll have to leave Europe." Well, thankfully, we've had 10 years to come up with a reply to all of that. It's quite stunning, actually, because the people who were proposing all of those things were, in fact, the SNP. They were and still are the ones who want to bankrupt us. They were and still are the ones who want to put up a hard border. And was SNP who wanted to leave the EU, not Europe, the EU in 2014, with no plan of how to get back in. Seriously, man, it took you 10 years to come up with that. And we're going to wait your verdict on whether Barack Obama will win the next US election. Just to be clear, I think he's a decent actor. And I'd be interested in listening to him talk about acting and his craft like that. And same for
something that he knows something about.
Something he knows, yeah, exactly. I'd be interested in talking, maybe even Brian Cox or Martin Compson. Maybe not Alan Cumming, though. But that's it. What is it about these lovies that they think we care about their political opinions? Oh, that guy was a dwarf in Lord of the Rings. Oh, let's vote for Indy now. I mean, it's preposterous. So, Peter, how about you stick to your job of pretending to be a grumpy dwarf off screen and on, but give politics a bye? You're not very good at it. People like us who spend our time analysing and talking to people what's actually going on, getting on, let us get on with the real job of politics. Well, not even us, we're analysts. We can admit that as well. But the people who are actually doing it, rather than having to listen to your figments of your imagination, especially ones that are 10 years old. I mean, imagine, I'm so angry about 2014. It's like, move on, man. Okay, so my Zoomer of the Week, Peter Grumpy Dwarf Mullan. There you go. Right. I mean, what is it with these celebrities? You think that, they can, as if we care. No, just go back into your mind and do some dwarf stuff. I don't know. I think he's done some other roles as well.
They get media space, don't they? Most people can't get that, so
right.
Unfortunately.
Well, how come they're always though? Because I think it's because the ones who are not nationalists, they would get scared to stand up.
Yeah.
Anyway, right up next is going to be Mark Zegfeld in his Zoomer.
Right, mine's going to be quick again because I do like these quick, funny Zoomers. Ones. Well, my Zoomer is the Scottish government. Why?
Yes.
Sorry.
No,
why
go
am
ahead.
Sorry.
What? Nothing. Just go ahead. Sorry, there's a noise.
Okay. My Zoomer is the Scottish government. Why am I doing the Scottish government? Well, they're in court this week, and they were arguing in court about the equality law. And the argument was men who are pregnant, yes, you heard me right, I'm not losing it, men who are pregnant have rights under the equality law. That
Okay.
is their argument this week, and they've actually said that men who are pregnant. So that alone has got to be a zoomer of any week at any time, because it's such a ridiculous argument to go to court and sit in front of a judge and say men who are pregnant have the same, need the same rights under the equality law. The world we're living in now, I just do not recognise it. I really don't. It's ridiculous, Mark.
Yeah, well, it's part of this ongoing court case. So it's at the Supreme Court right now, where For Women Scotland is challenging the Scottish Government statutory advice and definition of a woman. And that law basically said that a woman was anyone living as a woman, including biological males with or without a gender recognition certificate. And it said that they were women. Continuing, there was a bit of a stushy about it, and then they're continuing with it.
How do you get pregnant if you're living as a woman? If you're not
that's the thing. I mean,
a biological woman?
Well, this is the whole thing. So now they're going to decide. Supreme Court is going to decide that. I think that basically it's all to do with the difference between gender and sex. So,
but I just don't understand that argument of a man is, a man should have the same equality law if he's pregnant. That's the part I just do not understand.
It's a bit of a topsy-turvy world out there indeed. Now, Nicola Sturgeon herself was caught out by all this, as if they know all about this. Also, I wanted to bring this clip up. This is the clip that caused Nicola Sturgeon's demise. And I thought it'd be a good chance to have a wee look at this one again.
Are all trans women women? You haven't answered that question.
Well, that's not the point that we're dealing with
here.
That's
the question I'm asking.
Trans women are women, but in the prison context, there is no automatic right for a trans woman.
So there are contexts where a trans woman is not a woman?
No, there is circumstances in which a trans woman will be housed in the male prison estate.
Is there any context in which a woman born as a woman will be housed in the male estate?
Look, we're talking here about trans women.
And I'm now asking about women born as women.
I don't think there are circumstances there, but...
So it's different for trans women?
Well, yes. I'm not...
So they're not equal?
That is not... There is a risk assessment process done for trans women that takes account of the nature of the crime. Clearly, significant concern arises out of sexual crime and whether it's appropriate for them to be in a female prison or a male prison.
Well, that was
always good to revisit that.
That was yes. I got to get rid of this. That was an extremely important moment. It was the beginning of Nicola Sturgeon's downfall, and perhaps this court case is going to be perhaps the end of that. Who knows? Now we don't know, because the judges may come up with all kinds of nonsense as well. But I actually thought this would come up. There would be a point where someone would have to this type of thing would come to the courts like this, and a bit of reality would seep in. But in the meantime, we have to deal with a bunch of nonsense. Next up, Mary is going to. It's going to be Mary Zoomer.
I'm up against it already, I think.
Oh. Right, what have you got for us, Mary?
Okay, my Zoomer of the week are the Scottish Greens for expelling one of their councillors for saying that Hamas and Hezbollah should be classified as terrorist groups and that they shouldn't use from the river to the sea, which is against the Greens' policy.
Oh.
So this was John Ross Scott. He's an Orkney councillor. He claims that he has been ostracised from the party over these comments he made on X regarding conflict in the Middle East. Have you got the tweet there, Mark?
Yes. Sorry, I was just going to get that.
The Scottish Greens, they have a long-standing policy to call for the removal of Hamas from the UK's official banned terrorist list. And this came to the forefront last year when MSP Maggie Chapman, she claimed that Israel was to blame for the October 7 atrocities. Yes. Scott believes that both Hamas and Hezbollah should remain classed as terrorist groups, and that Israel, as the only true democratic state in the Middle East, should have the right to defend its boundaries. But this is
why
not,
is he in the Greens then?
I know,
For
this
God's
is not
sake.
acceptable to the Greens. It led to a complaint by his Edinburgh and East Lothian colleagues, which ended up with him being expelled. So he'd said that Hamas and Hezbollah were terrorists, and the Greens should not be supporting terrorists. Let's see if I can cut some of this out and make it a little bit. And in response to the councillor, he said, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, has genocidal implications, as we've seen in the past with Syria and Iran, and is best not used." So he plans to appeal against this decision. And he's been quite a successful Green. He gained the second highest Green vote in Scotland in the 2022 election and headed a 30-strong councillor group for about a year after. And he was the former leader of the Scottish Borders Council.
I wonder about this thing. I've always wondered about this in the Greens. It's like, why aren't they just talking about green issues? Why do they have to get involved in other stuff?
Everyone's wondering that, Mark.
Right, well, okay. But you know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's like, oh no, we don't talk about that. That's not to do with us. We just care about the planet. You know, if you go, all right, all those missiles that Hamas are sending in, that causes global warming. Okay, I could kind of understand that. But in that case, you'd be against Hamas, right? So anyway, but they just like, it seems like they seem to latch on to any kind of these tropes, almost anti-Semitism and whatever. Yeah, exactly. Telling the truth in Parliament now means it gets sacked. You know, it's in times of deceit, as Orwell said, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Anyway, all right, Mary, well done there. It's going to be up to Mark Zegfeld to decide this week.
Well, the actor.
You can vote for yourself.
Yep. Yeah, the actor. Yeah, all these actors they live in America. None of them live in Scotland. So you know they're whatever they say is irrelevant for me. I keep hearing too much from them. The Greens, yeah. You know, getting rid of someone for saying that Hamas is a terrorist group when we all know Hamas is classed as a terrorist group. It just shows you what the Greens are just as a party in Scotland. Absolute embarrassment. They're an absolute joke. But I'm afraid I'm gonna have to give it to myself, because anybody, the Scottish government, if anybody claims a man can be pregnant, they're a Zoomer, and so it's got to be the Scottish.
And not only that, go to court to try and defend it.
Yeah, and make it part of the argument that you want them to have equality law. A pregnant man. I'm sorry, but anyone who does that has got to be a Zoomer. They've got to be.
Yeah, it's a weird one as
You're
well.
The winner,
it's like you wanted to become a man, but you still want to get pregnant
and have a baby.
And I think there are some. I mean, there must be some issues as well with, all the drugs and everything like that, medical issues and possible dangers for the child. I don't know about that. Don't go on me.
Well, there's a mix-up of hormones. Put it that way.
Yes, and so how is that going to affect a child? I mean, there's all that type of stuff. I mean, it's fair. I mean, I think it's fair enough for people to want to look whatever way they want to do, act whatever way they want to do, but to try and force the rest of us to say that you are a woman or a man when you're not, or you're a pregnant man, you're like, no, actually that's not actually correct. Anyway, I mean, if that person wants to do all that, fine. Let them be, you can do all that as long as it doesn't harm the baby, of course. But then to try and involve us into something that's a deception.
We're all getting tied in knots. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the real issue here as well. But don't involve me in your that deception. But go on, enjoy your life nonetheless. Okay, well done, Mark, for a worthy win there. Yep. Definitely. Although I think Peter Mullan's a bit of a dick.
But he's just.
That's exactly right. Yeah, there's that scene from that movie, The Aviator, where Howard Hughes says to the actress, "You're just an actor." Because I just think they're the best, the bee's knees, but you're just an actor. All right, we're so happy to have you all with us on the show every week. in Scotland's #1 politics chat. We will see you at the same place, same time next Wednesday. Thought for the week is, if you, after all this, after 25 years of failure, after Nicola Sturgeon, Hamza Yousaf and Alex Salmond, after years of woke nonsense, speech restrictions, bad laws, you're still voting SNP. What? Wake up. It's nonsense. Anyway, thank you all for your support. Tell that to all your friends, your nationalist friends. Thank you for all your support, and we'll see you. A huge thanks to Mark Zegfeld for co-hosting and for his insights. And
no problem.
Thank you. And for Mary for her massive insights. And
thanks everyone for your comments. And yes, Catherine, you can buy us a pint.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, hope to see you all one day. And anyway, so thank you. Good night. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.